early, and now you're number 2. So it's been a good Friday because the YouTube algorithm's been a little bit painful recently because they made all these changes to their platform, so the videos aren't getting many views, and maybe that's another reason why the aforementioned channel we were talking about suddenly got taken down. Like I just
Yeah,
whenever they change their platform a little bit, from my unofficial understanding, humans have to re-rank a lot of the channels that are established. So that's why channels keep getting screwed because some human, maybe he's having a bad day, instead of giving it a 5, you might give your channel a 3 instead of a,
yeah,
and that's like, oh, I don't reach like 20% of my audience. It's a lot of human machine type of bureaucratic,
yeah,
whatever. We'll talk martial arts now. Anyways, guys,
yeah.
welcome Alan from In Defense of Traditional Martial Arts. He's tired from training. I just had coffee, so as you can tell, Alan's like, Jerry, man, stop being so energetic. But welcome, Alan.
All right. Yeah, no, I'm really excited to be on it. I've been a fan of yours for well, good few years now, it seems. So yeah, it's
Wow.
good to finally get on your channel.
Yeah, I remember when I first saw your comment because the thing is, like, the thumbnail. I first thought you were kind of like a troll, and then it's like later on, I would look at your stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy actually like he's passionate kung fu guy. But you know how sometimes you'll get people with like thumbnails that you can't really tell what it is, and they're like troll accounts. And so I
Yeah.
don't know, like maybe in the future you and I can design another thumbnail for you or something like that. But yeah, either way, I love what you've been doing because you're not afraid to kind of invite people on that might have different views. And I really enjoyed that that guy you brought on recently from the Fajin group. Like,
Oh,
was
that
very,
was
very.
it was a strange interaction. I think he's got problems, but yeah,
Man, so while we're at it, let's just get this first quote unquote difficult question out of the way. What else do you train besides jujitsu and kung fu, if you train anything else?
yeah. Well, so I started out in it's called Wudang, practical Wudang Tai Chi Chuan. It's got a lineage where somebody trained in Yang style and Wu style, and he kind of mashed them up together. And the
Oh,
head of our association was called Dan Docherty, and he was former Southeast Asian full contact champion. And
wow.
yeah, that was back in like the in late 70s, early 80s. And then
Mm-hmm.
he came to the UK. He learned in Hong Kong, came to the UK, opened up his own schools, and was very, very popular for a long time. And then
Mm-hmm.
sadly, a couple of years ago, he sort of passed away. But he was back then, he was trying to root out all of the nonsense that was in the Chinese martial arts. And then about 10 years ago, because I stopped training when I got custody of my 2 daughters and I didn't have much time for doing stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of stopped going to classes. I just used to train a little bit at home, forms training, but nothing that really gave me a sweat. So then as I got a bit older, I went to a Bak Mei class. Have you ever heard of Bak Mei Kung
Yeah,
Fu? White
yeah.
eyebrow Kung Fu?
By
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, yeah. And he I went to this class and I loved
Mm-hmm.
it. It was all traditional like training, but then talking to some of the people afterwards, like you'd say, well, it's not really about fighting though, is it? Like it's you know the way we train. Like if we wanted to fight, we'd do MMA, and then I've got all of these, like I know, but what we do is for the streets, and we rip people's eyes out, and I thought I can't be around these people. And just at that time, in my hometown, an MMA gym opened up. So
Oh.
yeah, so I did a taster course in boxing, and just because I wanted to get fit, and then I went along to like a fight night, saw some of the people there like competing in the cage. And I thought I want to do that, so I started MMA classes, started jiu-jitsu classes, and to start with the MMA, like when we were doing striking stuff, and it was a very grappling heavy gym I belonged to. I was always
Mm-hmm.
getting no, no, you need to kick this way. No, no, you need to punch this way. And then in the end, they just gave up. And my coach at the time, he tried to develop what I already did. And
Mm-hmm.
he was trained back in the 90s. He's well aware of like, Tai Chi. He started off in karate himself. And so he tried to work on the sensitivity stuff that I did and the kind of hand fighting. sort of style to benefit what I trained in. And none of that really came out in any of my fights that I had, but it is. If I can ever get some sparring footage to you, you'll see that I quite often play at people's hands and then
Mm.
sort of hit them and my strike is quite. There was a comment on your video saying like I need to commit more to punches and I need to like hit with more conviction. But it's a Tai Chi style of punching, and I broke one punch that I did down on one of my videos where you see it in full speed. It doesn't look like much, but when you slow it right down, you see his like chin going, and you see him afterwards, like grimacing and putting his mouth guard back in his mouth and that, and it's yeah, sometimes you don't want to hit full speed, full power. Sometimes you want to just tag, get the openings and hit. And that's a very much Tai Chi way of hitting.
Yeah. So I think credit goes to that MMA coach who was like, let's take what he has, right? Instead of
Yeah,
trying to kind of like change everything about him. So sometimes like coaching really does matter, man. And it sounds
yeah,
like
yeah.
when you transitioned into MMA, that coach really recognized, okay, he's got a really cool foundation. Let's not try to like completely morph it out of the way. So let's talk about when you finally decided to step into the cage. What was that decision like? I mean, from what you just told me, it's like you saw people training at the MMA gym. You're like, I kind of want to do it. But when you decided to step in for your first, second, third fight, what was the decision process like?
Well, so when I decided to fight, originally I was like, I need 3 fights. No matter what the result is, I'm getting on a bit. I want 3 fights, win, lose, or draw. I'm going to do 3 fights.
Hmm.
When I got to the third fight, because the people I was fighting, they weren't high level. Obviously, I'm not high level myself, but they were so easy, those fights. I felt kind of like I hadn't had a proper experience. I didn't have a chance to
Mm.
test myself. So I wanted to keep fighting until I found that level where I either got beat or it was such a hard victory that I felt like I really earned it. But then COVID happened,
Oh.
and then training went off a bit. That's when I got back into doing a lot of Tai Chi because when you find yourself on your own, those forms suddenly become really, really handy. And yeah, so by the time we come out of COVID, I just didn't have the same sort of energy. I was already, I was 42 by then.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm 45 now. And it's like, that's a lot of hard work, effort, and commitment to get that fit and ready to go in the cage.
Yeah, especially with two daughters, like you said, right? You got two
Yeah.
kids.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I'm about to be a granddad this
Wow,
December. So yeah,
congrats, dude. You don't look
yeah.
you don't look like you're in your 40s, just to let you know. I swear I thought you were in your 30s, man. So it's a compliment to you.
Yeah. Oh, very, very much. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, again, there's so much rubbish that gets thrown around. Like Tai Chi is all about longevity and all this kind of stuff. But let's face facts: exercise is about longevity.
Yep.
And yeah, there's so much misinformation about what Tai Chi is, and
Yep.
that's my main focus is to try and bring it back to what it is, a martial art, just like any other.
Yeah. It's interesting too. You mentioned your first Sifu Dan, right? I bet he probably got some flack too for trying to fuse systems.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, he didn't fuse the systems. This is like the fusion happened about 2 generations before him.
Oh.
So, and I think the story goes that it didn't have a name, and then when it moved, like it was Cheng Tin Hung moved to Hong Kong,
Hmm.
and he was like known as the fighting Tai Chi guy, and
Hmm.
when people, what is your system? And he's just, well, it's Tai Chi. And I
Hmm.
guess Shaw Brothers movies popular and all that kind of stuff. So people are like, Wu Dang, it's Wu Dang Tai Chi. It's that practical
Hmm.
Wu Dang stuff. And that name stuck. So yeah, he didn't fuse it together himself. He was like sort of third generation, I think, of that sort of style.
I see. Dude, I love this. Like I'm typing down the stuff you're telling me. So like I'll
Yeah.
look at this myself. Like, yeah, so yeah, this is great, man. This is awesome. Yeah, Wudong Taiji Chuan. Again, it's just a Wikipedia entry. I'm sure as I do more research, we'll find more. But yeah, okay, so obviously you've had fights in the cage and there are probably Facebook groups that you get into arguments with people,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah, lots of arguments. I tend to get into less arguments though, because when I started, I thought I was going to have trouble convincing like MMA sort of people and Thai boxers and all the rest of it. But through my experience, like because you get to punch these guys in the face, you know, and they get to punch you in the face. Like if you're saying, well, this is kung fu and this is working, if you hit them, then it's yeah, that's working. You know, if you sweep them, well, yeah, that works. You know, the big problem I have is to try to convince other Chinese martial artists that it works. You know,
Yeah.
it's not this like I touch you and then you jump back like 20 foot. It's a punch is a punch, a kick is a kick. You know, a throw is a throw. There's nothing magical to it.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe certain body mechanics are slightly different, right? And maybe certain fight
Yeah,
philosophies are slightly different, but you're not going to expect something that's so mind blowing, like exactly touch you and you jump back 600 feet type of thing.
uh, and the main excuse I get all the time is like, well, no, Tai Chi takes 20 years to master. And it's like, well, what use is it as a martial art then? You know, if I take this up at like 15 and I'm not going to be proficient in it until I'm 25, what's the point? I'm now already getting towards the end of my peak as a fighter,
Yeah.
and I'm only just beginning to be able to use it as a martial art. That's nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Those types of comments seem to me like it's just a way to get money out of the student, right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not gonna teach you the real thing. Yeah, I keep training, keep doing my laundry, keep like cleaning the dojo.
And I think a lot of it gets said to students because they don't want to admit that they've put all this time and energy into a martial art that they can't actually use against somebody that doesn't want to do it. You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the training 20 years thing. I don't hear that as much in America, in the kung fu community, but in America you definitely still hear the, oh my God, like, but we've had MMA guys come and like challenge us secretly and we've all beaten them. But
Yeah.
of course they never give you evidence, but you always hear
No.
them say that. Like I'm like, why can't you just film it? Oh, because we don't want to show our secrets. Well, if there's no evidence, I don't believe you. It's that
No.
simple.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many people you tell me you claim. If you don't show me, I don't believe you.
Yeah. Exactly. If there's no proof, there's no proof. I always get, well, MMA doesn't work on the streets, Kung Fu does. So I say, all right, I'll show you a video where somebody uses MMA or jiu-jitsu or wrestling or, Thai boxing in the street, and you show me a video of a Kung Fu practitioner defending themselves in the street, and we'll see who runs out of video evidence first.
Yeah. Yeah. So talking about traditional martial arts, this was back when YouTube was more chill. I had to delete that video because unfortunately it showed street fights. But I compiled maybe 5 or 6 examples of what I solidly saw were kung fu or karate techniques used on the street, right?
Yeah.
Well, like, I had to really dig. Like, I don't know if you've seen this clip. There was one kid who had like a stance like
Yeah.
that. That was a perfect
The
thing.
old
He actually used
Hungar
kung fu.
stance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was a who like the guy crossed the street to try to fight him, and he just did like a little technique and knocked the guy out. Like there are
Yeah, that's a police
examples.
instructor. Yeah, there
Yeah,
are
yeah,
out
the
there,
police
but there's
instructor.
very
Exactly. You've seen
few.
that one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but
But yeah, there's so few and far between.
so few
That's
and
my
far
point.
between.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Traditional martial arts can be used if you do them well. And let's face it, we're weekend warriors. Like traditional martial artists, we go out, we train a couple of times a week. We're not out there, you know, going to the gym first thing in the morning, then going for a 5 mile run, then doing a sparring session late that night. Of course, you're never going to be able to compete with people who do that. And to think that we can because we got chi energy or we've done some standard meditation is just ridiculous. And
Yeah.
but there's no reason why we can't. My point is, yes, I'm never going to beat a pro fighter in a fight, whether it's in the street or in the cage. But what I can do is I can stand across a pro fighter, have a sparring match with them, and we can both get something out of it. You should have the skill level, even if you're saying you're going to poke people's eyes out, you're going to rip their ears off, and all the rest of it. You should still be able to spar somebody else from another martial art with gloves and be able to have the timing and the distance and the hitting ability to make it work. You might not be better than a Thai boxer if you're competing with Thai boxing rules, but you should still be able to have a sparring session and both come away with it having learned something.
Yeah, yeah. Adding on to what you said, if your system has combat efficacy, when you're sparring or when you're training, you should be able to see, oh, there's an opening, oh, or there's a
Yeah,
transition to apply what I'm learning, right? That's the
yeah,
key. Like, after I went back to Muay Thai after doing capoeira, I saw different openings that I could use some capoeira, right?
yeah, yeah,
Doesn't mean I can beat a Muay Thai guy. Doesn't mean I'm only using capoeira. Doesn't mean capoeira is better than Muay Thai. It just means, okay, there's a reason why capoeira had fighting efficacy because,
yeah,
oh, even when I'm doing it in Muay Thai, oh, there's a cool little, if I cross my, oh, I could do it, like, if your style can't apply that kind of stuff, then maybe your style should just be called dance or gymnastics or
yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, and again, there's a lot of old people that do Tai Chi in the parks, and it's an exercise. And if that's where you're going with it, fine. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, it's a nice, gentle exercise, and a lot of people get something out of it. But don't then engage in a conversation about fighting and claim that you would be able to dispatch people half your age. You know,
Yep.
stay in your wheelhouse. Yeah, it's a nice exercise. You're doing form. Great. That's it.
Yeah. And that's why there is a push hands video on your channel, right? And that's the thing that kind of makes me so, just not so, but makes me a little angry about the whole push hands thing in Tai Chi because, like, people kind of, certain Tai Chi people hold it to such high regard. They take it so seriously. They forget. They like, it's like, what is that expression? Looking at the tree, forgetting the forest or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's supposed to be an exercise and it's been turned into a sport. That's fine. I've competed in pushing hands when I was younger as well. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's not lose, you know, the fact that it's just a training exercise. It's not meant to be fighting. You wouldn't do it in a fight. You'd get smashed in. And that's why I think a lot of people, Tai Chi people do get beaten because they think they're going to walk up to someone, touch hands with them, and then they're going to like make them, and then that person's just going to go, actually, bang.
Yeah. What's interesting too is, um, depending on the different Tai Chi practitioners, the different lineages, how seriously they take Tai Chi, it gets to a level where it's like, I've seen a competition where there's a Tai Chi guy who was like dressed up basically like he was gonna be doing jujitsu or MMA. Like he had a rash guard, he taped his hands, he had a mouth guard. Push hands, bro. Like you gotta take it less seriously.
Yeah.
Every time he lost the push hand exchange, he hit himself. It's like, are you sure you're in the
Yeah.
right sport? Maybe just go do MMA. Like you're taking
But
push hands
yeah,
way too seriously.
there's that side of it. You know, there is like, you know, if you want to go take it that far, if you're that aggressive, then go and do like MMA, go and
Yeah.
do kickboxing, go and do wrestling, judo, you know, sanda, any of these styles, just go and test yourself. And again, when I was like a kid doing because back then it was called sanshu instead of sanda
Hmm.
in this country anyway. And I used to go and watch these competitions. I used to think that's not real martial arts. They're not doing that right. And then in my mind, I was like, well, if I'm going to say that, I need to go and do it. You know, I can't be running this down and then having never competed myself. And in 2000, I had a Sanchi fight. I won it, but it was that was my first experience of full contact like fighting. And
Wow.
yeah, and that was when I literally was, you know, only training Tai Chi. So for people that say, oh, it's because you've learned MMA or it's because you've done other stuff. No, that was when I was doing pure Tai Chi. And I won it with grappling actually, which is
Yeah,
quite
I was gonna
funny.
predict that's probably what you did.
Yeah. Yeah, I was sweeping legs. I was I took to get my last point that won the match. I took his back and pretty much like suplexed him onto the
Wow.
floor. And that's the thing. Dan was teaching. He wasn't teaching, you know, like mystical techniques. He was teaching double leg takedowns. He was teaching single
Wow.
leg takedowns, hip throws, you know, suplexes, all this sort of stuff. That is contained in Tai Chi if you want to look at it. In fact, one thing I want to talk about actually with Dan, you know, when we talk about what can we learn from like traditional martial arts, Dan taught me how to calf kick back in 2000. Well, no, 1999, he first talked about calf kicking. That's
Wow.
over 10 years before it appeared in MMA.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't take much heed to it because I was like, no, but the Muay Thai people and the Kyokushin people, they kick each other in the thighs. Like I've heard, like I've been to sparring sessions. I've seen them like kicking each other in the thighs. Like I think they know more than you, Dan. Turns out they didn't. It changed the game, and he was advocating for it like a good decade before it started to appear in the UFC.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Um, what was a day in the life like back when you trained with Dan? Like, what were the training sessions like?
So I trained at a local place that wasn't run by Dan, but
Hmm.
once a month we would go to London, and it was a 4 hour lesson, and we'd go. So you'd start off, you'd warm up doing some Tai Chi exercises. You'd then do a bit of form, and then he would cut the class in half.
Hmm.
So the fighters would go to the left, the normal Tai Chi people would go to the right, and we do strength and conditioning stuff, like fighters should. But it wasn't. It was traditional, more traditional Chinese type of strength and conditioning. So you're doing lots of rolls. You're doing continuous hip throws on people, punching with weights. It's called running thunder punch, and you do
Hmm.
20 minutes with like 1 or 2 kilo weights, just punching, right, rotating you. And the idea is to try and take the tension out, because if you tense that whole time, you wouldn't last 20 minutes. And yeah, it was all just stuff that built your strength and conditioning, so that if you were going to fight, you'd be able to actually fight. And then we'd do some proper like wrestling stuff, not just the pushing hand stuff you'd see, but actually, like get the person on the ground and try and establish a superior position. And then if there were enough of us that wanted to do it, we'd put gloves on and we'd, punch and kick each other as much as we wanted.
Wow.
And yeah, and like a normal martial arts class,
Yeah.
basically. And that's what I've tried to explain to people. Tai Chi is the only difference, I'd say, is the more sensitivity side of Tai Chi is different to other martial arts that we see. That's the only difference, I'd say, is the emphasis on, the pushing hands training, whether that be freestyle pushing hands or like the different exercise, like two-handed, four-directional pushing hands, single hand pushing hands, all stuff to try and get. It's all. I've talked about this as well. People get so focused on you have to touch your opponent. It's not about touching your opponent. It's about understanding distance, understanding how close you are to someone and how far away you are. Because as we all know, that you've missed the punch, that you haven't. And when someone's trying to punch me, I want to be able to reach them, not the other way around. And that's for me, that is what Tai Chi is trying to do. It's not you have physical contact with the person. It's you understand without having to go through thousands of hours of being punched in the face. You understand distancing to your opponent because you've done all of these exercises that keep you at the safe end of a punch.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That I love that. And again, just hearing how you talked about how you started training, it reminds me very likely when Bruce Lee, let's say, was training with Ip Man, or when Bruce Lee was teaching in Seattle and stuff. That's probably how his classes ran too, right?
Yeah,
It's just like, there's a slight, what's the word I'm looking for? Ad hoc, maybe is the right word. There's like a slight, like, oh, there's a little bit of like a flow going on where it's not as structured. And let's say like a Muay Thai or boxing class where every time it's the same exact thing, but it's like
yeah,
you're getting everything maybe just a little bit longer, or just sometimes the orders might be switched, but like you're getting everything you're still getting at these modern combat sports gyms, but it's just a little bit more like a traditional class, and like
yeah,
that's why people go to these classes. It's got a little bit different flair than like a modern kickboxing class or a modern boxing class.
yeah. And I think and it's what I'd love to see. I'm trying to build up networks throughout the UK of people that are similar minded to me, so that we can get classes exchanging ideas and really try and build up this reputation, because Dan's Tai Chi had a great reputation of like building fighters. And even in the early days of MMA in this country, he had a few students that were competing at MMA at the time. None of them did particularly well, but they went out there and they did it. They fought. Some had a few victories. I don't think any of them ever went pro, but that's how it should be. Go out,
Mhm.
test yourself, and see if what you do works against a fully resisting opponent.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. So I think this is a perfect segue talking about resistance, fully resisting opponent. When did you stumble on the Adam Meisner stuff?
So my first experience of him, like I said, I started because I went back to forms training during lockdown. So YouTube, perfect place to look up the forms. And because he's so popular, I mean, he is massively, massively popular. Can't believe why, but it's he is. So his stuff comes to the top, and then I started watching him, and I think it was the video where he sat on a chair and he's like
Oh, I've seen that one.
doing
And like
sounds like
people just
that, and
flying.
people are
Yeah,
just
I've seen that one.
flying left, right, center, and I was like, this can't be real. And he, he at the time he was really trying to look like an old Chinese, even though he was only in his late 20s. I think he was trying his hardest to cosplay as an old Chinese like Tai Chi instructor from Hong Kong. You know, he had the comb over hair, he had the beer gut, the dodgy track suits that like Tai Chi instructors back in the 70s and 80s just seemed to dress like that. And it was like he took those images and thought, well, if I dress this way, people are going to take me more seriously. And I guess it worked because people do.
Yeah. As you were talking about, it, I was looking at his website. Um, I don't know, just even how he frames it now. The one of the websites I found was called Heaven Man Earth.
Yeah, that's his. Yeah, every man earth. Yeah.
Like, what is going on? Like, wow. I'm like, there's something off about this guy. Like, if I saw someone with a website called Heaven Man Earth, I'm like, huh. I think you're like misunderstanding whatever Taoist or whatever Buddhist philosophy you're reading into. Like,
Well, he even kind of does because he's Australian, isn't he? And he tries to do this like faux Asian accent, which is just really racist. And yes, you have to do the pong, and you have to, and it ends up sounding like David Carradine's character in Kung Fu, just
mm-hmm,
and and
mm-hmm.
and equally as racist. It's
Yeah.
mate, you're a white guy from Australia, act like it.
Yeah. And I'm looking at his website now. It looks like he had two bad injuries, and it seems like something from Kung Fu helped him a lot, which you hear that a lot, right? It's like Systema people love talking about it, how like Systema helped them a lot with injuries and stuff like that. And so I think just to very quickly address that, the body naturally heals, and there's things you can do to let it heal quicker. So what you don't want to do is you don't want to attribute a correlation to a causation, right? If your body's healing anyways, as long as you don't keep damaging it, whatever you're doing, I'm studying chess right now, right? My body's healing
Yeah,
from my ankle injury, but if I were to not use my brain, I might say, oh, chess healed my
yeah,
ankle, right? But it's just because
yeah,
my
yeah,
body's healing and I'm studying chess. Those are correlations. It's not
yeah,
causation. So you just have to be careful. Whenever I hear like, oh, like this thing I did like completely healed my body, it's like maybe it's not a causation. Just something to keep in
yeah.
mind. Since Al and I are talking about just how to like screen through BS, I think that's a very important thing. Just remember correlation, association, not always causation. Remember that.
Yeah, and even there's probably is some causation in it, but it's the same as you hurt your back, and the doctor will say, well, if you do some exercises that strengthen the muscles in your stomach and your back and that's going to help stabilize your back, and you won't
Yeah.
get as many. And so you've hurt your ankle. You start doing these Tai Chi exercises. They're nice and gentle, so they're not aggravating the injury. You're strengthening your muscles at the same time, and you feel like your ankle's better than it's ever been. No, you've just done some exercise.
Yeah. Yeah.
The right kind of gentle exercise, not to aggravate the injury, but exercise all the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be magic. It doesn't have to be chi. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, your body's
Exactly.
going to heal anyway. And trust me, when you get older, it heals a lot slower. So if Tai Chi is this magical thing, I'd like to have some of it my way, please.
Yeah, I think the real Tai Chi will eventually be stem cell therapy. Like I think
Yeah.
we'll make a lot of advances in stem cell therapy. So all of us who hurt ourselves at an older age will just be injecting stem cells into ourselves. So let's talk about. So you've issued challenges to Adam Meisner's people, right? What were the reception like? I mean, I was watching one of those videos where there was all that controversy about a guy sort of wanting you to go to his gym, but then like, oh, he had an injury, so then there was all this back and forth. Tell me about all that. What made you decide? Okay, let's challenge these people.
Well, so whenever I go on these Misner videos, there's always people like, I'll fight you, I'll do it. And I was like, we don't need to fight to show that this is bull. What we really need is just for someone to stand there. You know, like a bit like you had that video where you had that Tai Chi guy come over and you were just all like, no, I'm not going to move. And the guy like just got more and more aggressive and physical the more it went. And that's what I wanted to do. It like Meisner was like just have him stand there and like, do this sort of stuff. Like, there's a video of him where he flexes his thigh muscle, and his brother jumps like about 5 foot back, and people are like, "Oh my god, his chi energy is so powerful." It's like, "Oh my god, your susceptibility to bull is just way strong." Like, have him do that with me. I'll grab his leg, and then let's see if he can propel me back 5 meters. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I was on his video. I saw this, and I thought I'm going to issue my challenge. And then, but I just wrote a comment saying I'd love to like challenge Misner just to reproduce this stuff on me.
Yeah.
And then one of his like fanboys replied, "Well, you don't need to challenge him. He's got plenty of students out there." So I thought, that's right. So I made a video, I posted it online. Then another Misner fanboy got in touch with me and said, "Look, here's a list of all his students. Here's a list of some other Tai Chi teachers that do similar stuff. Challenge them." So I went through all of these emails. I sent them off. I got a reply from one guy who'd moved to Bali. And then the only other reply I got was from Meisner's UK rep, who said, "Oh, I've injured my ankle at the moment, but otherwise I'd love to, but I can't because I've injured my ankle. But you're welcome to come to any classes you want, but no filming's allowed." And it's like, but no film and no proof. And then he sent me a video link to this guy who was like, I used to disbelieve Misner, but then I went to a class. And now I'm a devout like follower of his. And he had something like 400 followers, this guy. And I'm like, but there's no footage. It's just him saying that. That's not proof. That's just some guy talking.
Yeah.
And he said, well, if you had a bigger channel, I'd like pay credence to you, but you've only got about 150 followers. And so I got back in touch with him after about a year and a half, when by then I had about 600 followers. And I said, like, well, my channel's bigger than that guy who you paid attention to last time now. So how about doing it now? And then he reported my video, he got it taken down.
Goodness.
Yeah, so I had to edit a load of stuff out.
Oh,
and then I re-uploaded it. And then, yeah, he's been on a few podcasts and he's spoken about me. And he tried to claim that he asked me to go down and I chickened out. And it's like, he's never asked me to go down. Yeah, the only invite I got was if cameras weren't allowed. And it's like, no, there's no point in me going. I already know it's bull. If I can't film it, there's no point.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the the video of mine you mentioned, that Green Dragon Tai Chi master dude, right? I give him credit. At least he allowed me to film. But part of me feels like the only reason he allowed me to film is that he ate up his own BS so much. That's why he allowed me to film. So it's like there's different levels of like how much you believe in yourself, right? It's just like, yeah, update on that video. I'm probably gonna redo that video because the commentary worked at the time, but obviously now I'm a little bit more older. I want to like be a little bit more. I want to still be funny, but be a little less sarcastic. So I might redo the commentary. That's why if those of you looking for the video, you can't find it as much anymore. I was like, that video's cool, but like it's more like sophomoric humor. Like I need to just let him fall on his sword. I don't even need to like add in my own humor as much. So I'm gonna redo that video. So for those of you watching,
I really like that video.
What do you want? Let me do this. I can give you the footage too. If you want to give your own commentary, feel free to use it. Because again, you have a unique Tai Chi experience. If you want to like commentate on some of it, I'll send you the raw footage if you want.
Yeah, that'd be cool actually.
Okay, and then we could like do a collab like that. I would love
Yeah.
to. I'm serious. Like, used to have it in a drive. I don't know if I still have the footage in a drive, but I'll put it in a drive again. And if you want to download and see any of it, because again, it's just, yeah, it's. I hope you get to capture stuff like that, but I went into it because an MMA guy, and you could see this with Adam Meister too. Adam Meister had like Lyoto Machida, and he
Oh
had
yeah, it was Verdum.
Fabricio, yeah, Verdum, and
Yeah,
his yeah, and it was the same thing. Like the only reason I went to this Green Dragon dude, again, I forgot his name, but I'm just calling him Green Dragon. The only reason I went to a seminar was because an MMA guy recommended him. And MMA guy's like, hey, this guy's awesome, like his Tai Chi's legit. And so, like, that's the only reason I drove 2 hours with my friend at the time, man. It's like, I would never have done that if the MMA guy didn't recommend him. And it turns out it was such a
yeah.
bad experience.
I see. I thought you knew that he was
I
like,
didn't. And I
yeah,
think that was part of what made my commentary extra funny, / like, I was like angry because it's like, we wasted so much time, right? Like,
yeah.
I think if I had the right expectations, it would have been different. But I was just like, I went into it every moment, even during that thing. I was trying to justify. It's like, but my MMA friend says he's legit. I'm trying to like explain away all the warning signs in my head, and then finally, when I got home, I'm like, okay, it was all BS.
The thing is, when you get two people like standing there, and this guy says, stand like this, and I'm going to do this, and then it's very easy if you don't pay close attention to go, oh my god, this man's great. But it's like, well, anyone can do. If you're stood bladed and someone pushes you, they can use their little fingers on your hands and push because you've got nothing to push back on.
Yeah,
And then you end up pushing yourself over. It's not chi magic. It's just body mechanics.
yeah, it's body mechanics. And
Yeah,
then, please go ahead.
I was
Please
going to
go
say,
ahead.
but a lot of people get carried away with that. And they go, oh my god, this man, if he really went for it, he'd like really hurt you. It's like, well, then put some gloves on. If he's really good, he'd be able to dial it down. When I first sparred my coach, because I was never delusional. Like I always knew a professional fighter would smash me up. But I always had it in my head. Maybe I was quite delusional because I always had it in my head. Well, I'd give them a big enough fight that they'd never want to fight me again. And then the first time my coach sparred me, he just had his last professional fight about a year before that, and he said, "Right, put some gloves on. It's time we had a bit of a mix up," and he battered me. Like it was embarrassing. It was like I thought I've wasted all of these years. I stuffed some of his takedowns to start with. I did catch him with a couple of punches, but nothing like he was catching me with. And then he just got something Tai Chi needs to learn about is wall wrestling. Because out in the open, I was actually able to stuff like the takedowns. As soon as he put me up against the wall, I had nothing because I've never experienced anything like it. He get like clasp around my waist, and I was down. I had no comeback from it. And I think a lot of traditional artists could get a lot from just going to a local MMA gym when they have an open mat, sign a waiver, put a gum shield in, put some gloves on, and just have a bit of play around with the students. You will soon see that what you've got isn't what you think you have.
Yeah, exactly. And the key is like, if you do it safely, you can learn a lot and not get
Yeah.
hurt. That's the thing. They just don't understand it.
Yeah, that was my point. I got onto and I totally forgot. So my point was, he could have killed me, but obviously because he's skilled, he was able to dial it back enough so that we could both get something out of that exchange. And that's the thing, if you are a deadly Tai Chi teacher, you should have enough skill to be able to put some gloves on and do it safely.
Yeah. And that was the extra funny / cringe part about that video of mine that we mentioned. Like, if he was such a good Tai Chi master, why is he cheating his own rules? Why is he muscling? That was
Yeah.
the cringe part. When you look at the footage, he says don't move your feet, but he keeps stepping. Why
Yeah.
are you cheating your own fucking rules? I'm gonna use the F word once. Why are you cheating your own fucking rules? You know? And what I mentioned in the video, which, now that I think about it, I really should redo it because there were parts of it I didn't show because I was commentating over it. But if you look at the raw dialogue, like, I was sort of getting at I was being very nice and I was trying to justify it, so I wasn't challenging him as much. But the questions, sort of what we're talking about, I sort of asked him in a more polite way. Like I was like, because I'm giving so many rules, I'm paraphrasing what I asked him, but because I'm getting so many rules, I have to keep in mind so many things that are arbitrary. I'm sort of not focused on him, right? I'm focused on myself. It's like, oh, so I have to keep my foot not moving. Oh, I can't use force. Like you're in your head. So you're already lost because you're trying to figure out the rules and then he can like, he knows the rules, right? So he can like do stuff to you.
Yeah,
That's part of it in addition to him cheating the rules. Even if he wasn't cheating the rules, the fact that you have to like think about the rules that are so arbitrary, you're already in your head. You can't like respond. You can't be in the moment.
yeah. And that again, that a lot of that footage with Meisner and the Lyoto Machida and Verdun was, and I think there was because it wasn't Brian who was it? He had a strong man on with him as well,
Yeah,
didn't
I
he?
I forgot what the strongman's name is. Yeah, but yeah, the
Yeah,
strongman. Yeah.
but he spoke in a podcast about it, and he was saying like he was very much told, you can't do this, you can't push, you can't pull. All you can do is stop Adam from doing what he wants to do. So of course, like, if he'd have wanted to, he could have just picked Adam up and put him to the side. But he's been given this rule set, which isn't discussed in the documentary.
Yeah.
And so he's just trying to stand there, and people are like, "Oh my god, look, he can't even like push Adam over, and he's a strong man." And it's like, well, no, he was never allowed to.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. I need to find that interview, and if you can, please send it to me. Like that's exactly what everything like that interview just is a perfect representation of everything we're talking about. Like
Yeah,
obviously kung fu people, tai chi people love making the excuse. Oh, the rules of MMA. The rule.
yeah,
Yes, there's I can see that side, right? But like you can't then turn around and put 67 more arbitrary rules for push hands. Like you see, like you can't drink your own Kool-Aid, or maybe
yeah,
the other word is you can't be hypocritical. I guess be more. You
yeah,
can't be hypocritical. Like rules, rules, rules. But then like you have these competitions with
yeah,
these stupid arbitrary, like even freestyle push hands. The amount of arbitrary rules in it. Oh my god.
yeah. There's so many.
Yeah.
And but a lot of these traditionalists will say, well, you shouldn't be doing these push hands competitions. But what they forget is back when they're talking about these times when these Tai Chi teachers were awesome, when they challenged each other, they had rules then. It wasn't let's just poke each other in the eyes and jab each other in the throats and all the rest of it because they had a living to make. You can't injure each other. And quite often the rule set would be like you have to get me off a platform or I have to get you off the platform. And that's the rules. That's not a fight to the death. This idea that you can't have rules or you can't learn something if there are rules. Rules are there to keep us safe. And you can acknowledge I rolled with somebody, a jiu-jitsu guy, and he'd get me in a position and he'd start doing that. He wouldn't actually hit me. He'd like just I'm going, what are you doing? He's like, well, I need to know if it was an actual fight that I could hit you and you couldn't hit me. And it's like, oh, there you go. You've got a rule set, but you're still seeing what you could get away with if that rule set wasn't there.
Yeah. The other important thing that you'll hear sometimes in history is, oh, back in the day, in Japan or in China, those fights were to the death.
Yeah,
I think a lot of that is myth. I think you
yeah,
got to be very careful when people say there were records of people signing. Oh, like, we have a waiver, like to the death. But first of all, you got to think about the context of that, right? Some of that could have been marketing. Even if it
yeah,
wasn't marketing, like there were always laws in this society, right? Like, so you gotta be careful whenever people are like, yeah, back in the day, like when they fought on the lake, Tai and Tai Chi, it's to the death. It's like, you gotta turn on your little like BS meter, your adult meter, and be like, you know,
yeah. I think that when people have tried to find the evidence of these old challenge fights, there's very few and far between actual cases where they went ahead, even with rules. Yeah, it's not as common as people like to make out. And then when you see footage of these challenge fights, like you look at the rooftop fights in Hong Kong that made that Ip Man famous because his students went out and fought on these rooftops. They look like a barroom brawl. They don't look like kung fu fights. You know, if that's what we're aiming for, like MMA has made martial arts look like they're supposed to look skillful, controlled, measured. You know, before we had MMA, we had a lot of people that had probably never had more than one or two fights in their life and didn't really know how to react to someone really trying to hit them.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So, what is the update on the Meisner situation? Like, are you potentially going to challenge more? Are they going to challenge you now? What is?
I mean, the update with the none of, I think like Meisner's got it's out there. I know for a fact Meisner knows about me. He's talked about me in some of his podcasts, not directly mentioning my name, but pretty much saying it's me. You know, like and he is so controlling. He even you know he's so controlling of what his other teachers can and can't do that none of them are going to accept my challenge. So my aim is to try and find other Tai Chi teachers that claim this sort of stuff. There was a guy, he kept accepting it. We'd arranged for me to go down, then last minute he'd change his mind and tell me not to. I, I think I've kind of left that challenge behind for the most part. It's still out there. Any UK martial arts practitioner within a drivable location, if they want to prove that they can make me hop like we see in those videos, you do that, and the person like hops around, get in touch. I'll come to you. We'll film it, put it out there. But I think I'm just trying to move more towards being a bit more positive. You know, get like meeting up like we had the Fajin project meet up. Uh, we can, you know, like put some gloves on, have a bit of a spar, have a bit of a wrestle. Like, let's make it a bit more realistic again instead of this sort of cosplay that Chinese martial arts has become.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that Fajin guy. You know, like I'll even share the screen for people. Guys, make sure to go follow him, okay? Make sure to go follow our man Alan. But you know, I saw this popped into my feed, thank goodness. So that means YouTube is promoting you. So like what happened here? Like, first of all, this guy was so tense. Like obviously he was a little
Yeah,
scared. But like what happened here? Let's explain this whole like incident and why you guys met up and everything.
yeah. So this guy was telling me that Wing Chun, you can't use gloves with Wing Chun because Wing Chun is so deadly that you just can't do it. You know, the punches don't work with gloves on because they take padding off. So I kept saying it's nonsense. You know, again, yeah, maybe it can take some of the power out. I don't believe that to be true. But if you're both wearing gloves, you've both got the same disadvantages. And he kept saying he can't explain it. We need to meet up. So I met him, and none of what he said really made sense. And he kept doing this same thing that a lot of these people do. He's using me to demonstrate on, and so I'm being compliant with him and doing what he wants me to do. And then he's like, "See, I'll do this," and it's like, but if I wasn't being compliant, and this is
Like
what
there,
happened
like
here,
there.
yeah. So if I wasn't being compliant, you're saying that you he was at this point he was saying he'd just track me down. He'd trap me. He'd stop me. He'd come in and he'd use his trapping hands. And what I was saying is, if I was fighting him, I'd be either be the whole way out as I was at the beginning, or I'd be the whole way in, and then I'd go out again like that. And I mean, I don't think it comes across on the video, but he was breathing so hard after that little bit of an exchange as well. You know, if it had gone any longer than that, I don't think he would have been able to keep moving. And I was saying, like, I could keep circling around like that forever because he'd say, no, you'd run out of space. I'm like, but how? I'm just going to keep circling like that, and I'm just going to pick you off with little punches. Like
Yeah.
this idea that you can slowly step towards me in this, you know, like stance that Wing Chun people have and trap me is nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah. I see. No, it's funny. I didn't like pick this spot. I just arbitrarily clicked on a
Yeah,
spot and it was the perfect spot to kind of
yeah,
get
it
some
is the
context. It's
perfect.
so
Yeah,
funny. But like you see how this guy how he is? He started the video like that. So tense, man.
yeah,
And it's exactly like you said. if within 15 seconds of a fight, he'd be gassed, like with
Yeah,
this level. But like, I've seen a lot of Wing Chun people like that. You know, I don't know what is, maybe from Chi Sao training or something. Like, they're so tense.
yeah.
Like,
I
he's
think,
got what I call that Wing Chun hunched thing. Like, I've seen other
yeah.
Wing Chun people like that. Like, you know, it's almost like they're trying to adapt certain things from boxing, but they're doing it wrong. So they have this weird body posture.
I think again, it's Tai Chi people spend too much time doing the push and hand stuff. And Wing Chun definitely spend too much time in this Chi Sao range. And that was one of the arguments I had with this guy is when you've got that Chi Sao stuff going on, that's a fraction of a second in a fight.
Yeah,
Why are you dedicating 90% of your training to a point in a fight that's going to last less than 3 seconds?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and so they spend so much time doing it. And there are Wing Chun guys out there that can really use their stuff in a fight, but they're much more realistic with how they approach their training and how they spar and how they feel like Chi Sao actually works. And I was lucky enough in the 90s to train with one of Bruce Lee's like students, Larry
wow,
Hasdell, and
wow. Yeah, he's a
yeah,
legend.
yeah, and he was teaching all the Bruce Lee trapping stuff that he got taught at the end. But he said, I don't like it. He said, I teach this because people want to learn it because it's Bruce Lee taught it, and I
Yeah,
teach it how Bruce Lee taught it. He said, but I have never once been in a situation where I could have used this system. He's like, it doesn't work. It's too complicated. It requires somebody to hold their fist out, which never actually happens in a fight. He didn't like it. He taught it because Bruce Lee taught it, and other people wanted to learn it. But he himself was adamant it was nonsense that wouldn't work. And out of all Bruce Lee's students, he was the one that went out there and actually did a whole lot of sparring and a whole lot of. He carried on Jeet Kune Do as it was supposed to be. Jeet Kune Do should have been MMA. You know, you're supposed to pick up what works, discard what doesn't. But Jeet Kune Do now has been turned into this system in itself, which is totally against what Bruce Lee actually stood for.
yeah. I think Larry Hartzell and Eric Paulson, I think the two of them really
Yeah,
kind of put their gloves up and, you know, did a lot. And yeah, like if it really evolved like what Bruce Lee's philosophy was, right? It would have, I could even arguably say it could have been a better version of contemporary MMA. But obviously there's a lot of money to be made, right? Commercializing, be like, no, but this
yeah,
was Bruce Lee's system, right? So like it became what it didn't want to be, what
yeah,
Bruce Lee
exactly
didn't want it
that.
to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really sad how it ended up. I think, and people's attitudes sort of. But then I think like jiu-jitsu's got a bit like that. Brazilian jiu-jitsu's got a bit like that as well.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of people still living off the legend of the Gracies when they went out there. And that's a long time ago now, guys. You know, you talk about the 90s.
Yeah.
Like things have moved on.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not this magical system, and people still believe. You know, and again, we've seen so much evidence where you get a Brazilian jiu-jitsu blue belt who's magic on the ground, but then he gets into a real fight and he can't get the person down on the floor, and then just ends up getting punched and pushed and embarrasses themselves. You know, yes, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is essential to learn some groundwork if you're serious about fighting, but in and of itself, it isn't the system that a lot of people think it is.
Yeah. And the other unfortunate thing about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is it's it's morphed into okay, like this instructor or this former world champion system of jiu-jitsu. And it's like,
Yeah,
like he couples it with his own merchandise and his own diet and his own.
yeah,
It's like, and everyone's all about this guy. Oh, we're this. Like, I remember when I was actively wanting to train in jiu-jitsu, like literally I would go to schools and be like, yeah, but like we're this person's lineage. Yeah, but we're
yeah,
better than that person's lineage. Oh my god, I saw you film that. I'm like, aren't you guys just becoming what you've criticized the kung fu or the karate
yeah.
community?
And the other side of it as well is, you know, karate back in the 80s was a very hard style kind of, you know, people would hit each other and that. And then as it got more and more popular, people don't want to lose students. And Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is getting like that as well. You know, like I'm from the Carlson Gracie lineage, and it's like, you know, one of the phrases was, "This ain't Disneyland," you know, but it's being turned into a bit of Disneyland. You know, there's people I see now who got blue belts, purple belts, that wouldn't have been a two-stripe white belt back in the day. You know, you've got to keep those belts coming. You've got to keep those gradings coming if you want to keep people. And don't get me wrong, at high level, like the jiu-jitsu game has evolved so much. You know, like it's amazing at high level. You know, you look at like Gordon Ryan and like all those top people are just amazing, and they would tear to shreds the Gracie brothers in a jiu-jitsu match if they were to come against each other. But the general jiu-jitsu that I see around, in you know, it's getting watered down. It's people want to keep students. The level of belts is not the same as what it was, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a balance because you want to obviously have a safe training environment. You want to keep
Yeah,
students, but the fundamentals of jujitsu, right? You have to give them this reality check. Unless you're like sleeping in your bed and someone attacks you, which can happen, especially for
yeah,
women, right? Like there are essential things that women should learn, and women should learn jujitsu. I 100% believe that. But like
yeah,
you have to emphasize to them, okay, like we're starting on our knees, we're starting on the ground, okay, like, but how do you get here? And if you're training in this sort of like semi-safe, semi-cultish environment where it's like they don't understand the realities, there's a big disconnect. So like on the street, I've seen so much cringe stuff where like the fight could have even been prevented, but the jiu-jitsu guy decided to grapple first. Obviously, there's arguments for that, right? I would disagree with
yeah,
it, but I can see why he would try to grapple first, if he really felt threatened, but he didn't have to grapple. But then it went into the middle of the street. They're rolling around the street. Yes, he eventually won, but you are rolling around in the middle of the street, man. Like a
yeah,
car could have
yeah,
come and ran
yeah,
over both of you. But like the jiu-jitsu can be like, oh my God, look at him show off his amazing jiu-jitsu. He protected himself. Yeah, maybe in that such situation, you like the 2 out of 7 times you like did the right thing. But like I think the 5 out of 7 times would argue actually that was not the right thing to do. You took him out, it's on concrete in the middle of the street, cars were
yeah,
coming by, like what the heck are you doing? That disconnect, right? That disconnect
yeah,
is and that's what I worry about the jiu-jitsu community. That's why I love jiu-jitsu. I like you said, I think it's a fundamental thing that everyone should learn, but I love bagging on them. I love getting them angry.
yeah.
The stuff they say back to me is so fun. Oh, Jerry, you hate jiu-jitsu. Oh, Jerry, it's only because you don't know jiu-jitsu. Oh, it's like, no, I think jiu-jitsu is awesome. I think it's beautiful, but there's a disconnect right there. And you guys
Yeah.
need to understand that, like with your training.
Well, I went to a self-defense seminar that was run by a Carlson Gracie black belt, and he was basically trying to unteach people a lot of the stuff that they already do from a self-defense situation. You know, he's like saying, "Knee on belly, that's what you want. You want knee on belly. You don't want mount." He's like, "Why don't you want that?" And I actually answered it. I was a white belt at the time. I was like, "Because knee on belly, you can get up and get away if someone's coming towards you. If you're on mount and one of his friends comes and kicks you in the head, you and he's like, perfect. And we got on really well because of it. But a lot of these people, he's like, no, 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 don't take the back, don't take the back. Like, because they're so got this into the about take the back and take the person out. Well, that's great in a match. It's great in the cage. But if you're on the street, the last place you want to, don't get me wrong, if you find yourself on the floor with someone and you get to that position, you're going to take it. But that's not the ideal place that you want to be in a street fight. It's just not. And I think a lot of these jiu-jitsu people need to learn about the realities of what happens in a street fight if that's their focus, if they feel like they want to use their martial art in a street fight, they need to learn about what a street fight actually is.
Yeah, yeah. I know of two examples. Again, very talented jiu-jitsu people, right? One was mounted on the other guy hitting him. There was a street fight, went
Yeah,
into the bushes. Of course, the guy who he's hitting, the girlfriend comes behind and start hitting. Obviously, she didn't do much damage to him, but
yeah,
still, like that could have been bad getting hit in the back of
yeah,
the head, right? The other situation, again, this guy's very talented, but again, he he had the guy kind of like here, and the guy just
yeah,
bit, and he has a permanent scar. Yes, he and the girlfriend also came and started hitting, so
yeah,
he was fighting off two people while the guy here was biting him. He still won the exchange, right? But
yeah,
still, you have a permanent scar here, and it could have gone really bad. What if there were three people? And
yeah.
he learned, to his credit, this guy I'm talking about, the guy who got bit here, he learned. He's like, man, I'm never gonna grapple like that in the street again. But like, what got him to get to that point? If your martial arts training gave you the reality. You should have never gotten to that point and learned and found out on the streets, right?
Yeah,
Like, you know what I mean?
yeah. There's so much more. Like, it's what gets me when people go, "Oh yeah, but my martial arts for the streets." It's like, well, there's so much more to self defense than learning to fight anyway. Because there's consequence. If you grab on someone, bite their nose off, there's a consequence to that. You'll go to prison for that. This idea that, well, in the street, I'm going to poke his eyes out, I'm going to rip his ear off. It's like, then you'll go to prison. There's in the UK, you've got reasonable force. If someone knocks your beer over in a pub, that's not reasonable force enough to, like headbutt someone and kick them unconscious on the floor. It's so you've got to learn about the law. You've got to learn about de-escalation. Someone knocks your pint over. Okay, mate, sorry. Should have watched where I was going. See you later.
Yeah.
You've got you've got. I think I've seen it quite popular, and it really made me think. You've got to have a bit of parkour skill about it, because all this, well, I've just run away from a guy with a knife. Well, that's all well and good, but not if you can't leap over a barrier or like suddenly jump over a table or something like that. You've got to put barriers between you and that person with the knife. You've also got situational awareness. Walking into a pub, are people staring at you? Are they looking at you? Is there a few people nudging and like pointing you out and let's get out of here before it even starts? But then when it all comes down to it, you do need the skills to be able to knock someone out or to choke them unconscious if it gets to that point.
Yeah. It's so funny because some of the most talented MMA people I know, some of the most talented martial artists I know, they tend to not have that situational awareness. I don't know what it is. Like I've had incidents, I've talked about this with other people on this channel before, but like I've had incidents where there were sketchy people like literally getting behind one of my coaches.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, I'm not worried." I'm like, "Really? But what if the guy just starts attacking you? You might be able to fight him off, but he's gonna get the first hit on you while you're not
Yeah.
looking at him." Like I've had so many incidents like that. I had an incident. There was a like homeless guy on something, like running exactly towards me. So I'm like, okay, all right, you're running towards me. I'm getting away. My coach is
Yeah.
like, no, you gotta like sidestep him. If he wants to fight him. I'm like, but what if like this
Yeah.
guy's
Yeah.
he's on something? What if he pulls something? He's like, well,
Yeah.
I have a knife too. I'll fight him with a knife. I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, I've
Yeah.
heard that from people who I consider very talented martial artists, and they say stuff like this.
Yeah. And you're like, the best solution is to just not be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Absolutely.
another one of my coaches, he did a better thing. One time some guy, he got into a thing and this was in Europe too, right? So again, the laws are different, but the guy had a knife. So he grabbed the chair. He's like, "Okay,
Yeah.
look, if we're going to go, we're both going to get hurt." And they backed off, right? So that was a little bit better, right? A little bit
Yeah.
better. Still,
Yeah.
I don't know why he got into like a street situation in Europe. I think it was unfortunately related to like he wanted to like hook up with a girl or something, like it's things,
Yeah. Yeah. The
self-defense that could
usual.
have been
Yeah. The
avoided.
usual.
Yeah. But yeah,
Women.
it's
Yeah.
like that. Oh yeah, that's what happened. So like, he wanted to hook up with a girl. The guy sort of cock blocked him, so he got mad at the guy, and then they were about to get
Yeah.
into a fight. You see, like that could have been prevented. Whatever, he cock
Yeah.
blocked. Whatever, it's Europe. Go like find another girl you can hang out
Gotta
with or
find another
something.
guy. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's not worth fighting over. And again, even if you are massively superior to the person in front of you, there's a chance that they could stab you. There's a chance that they could get a lucky punch. How
Yeah,
bad's that going to look if you get like knocked out by some nobody when you're supposed to be a MMA coach, Or there's a chance, and it's happened. You could punch him, he could get knocked out, crack his head open on the pavement, and you go to prison for 25 years for
yeah,
manslaughter.
yeah,
It's really not worth it.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. Does your wife and do your daughters train?
Well, my youngest, she used to do jiu-jitsu. She got to like a yellow belt in the kids grading system. And yeah, she was really successful in competitions. My eldest, I always wanted her to do jiu-jitsu because I always think they should get to at least like a blue belt standard so that if a man does take him down, they can get out from underneath them and be on their merry way if they are able to. But no, she just never. She tried it, she didn't like it. I don't think you can force people to. And yeah, my wife, she's not the physical confrontation type, unfortunately. I can think of nothing better than having like a missus that does it because you spend so much time wanting to train it'd be great if you were both like wanting to train. You could both be living in the gym, but life isn't always that that courteous.
Yeah, exactly. So you're obviously a martial artist with a day job, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I see. Now, what industry are you in, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I can't talk about my contractually obliged,
Okay,
but
no
I'm in
worries.
the pharmaceutical industry. So
Oh, okay, I
yeah,
see.
I can't talk about what I specifically do, but yeah,
Hmm.
it's pharmaceuticals.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that also makes sense why, you have such a great experience in martial arts and why you haven't devoted more time to YouTube, right? Because you got a day job. It makes sense now.
Yeah,
It's like, yeah.
so yeah, the time that it's taken up, especially since COVID, because like it went crazy, and yeah, because I never stopped even during COVID, all the lockdowns. I was, essential worker, having to carry on doing my day job,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's tough trying because filming stuff is easy, as I'm sure you know. It's the editing that's the real, yeah.
Yeah.
It must be great to be that popular that you can hire an editor to do it all for you.
Yeah, that's my goal for one day. I
Yeah,
haven't really hired people to edit it. Shout out Miles. Miles has tried to edit some of my stuff, so I give him a lot of credit. But like, I Miles is just doing it to learn. But I haven't hired
yeah,
someone who knows how to edit yet. I'm not at that point right now, and I don't know if I ever want to hire people to edit. I take that back. I do, but it just right now I don't know what the system is to screen because like part of me like I don't even know what's the best for YouTube yet because Mr. Beast had his system, right? But Mr. Beast turned out to be unfortunately a little bit of a scumbag. So like I
yeah,
don't want to like promote his way of like a 6 second edit, a 2 second edit thing. Like I don't want to do that. Like he did inspire me. I was like maybe I should like try to turn my content more like Mr. Beast, but then it turns out like one, he was ruining YouTube even if he wasn't such a scumbag. But now
yeah.
look at all the videos showing you. So like I don't want to like so like I almost feel like I have to relearn how to edit for social media. That's not also like a Mr. Beast type of way of editing.
Well, and they change as well, don't they? When someone cracks the algorithm, they then change it to make sure that not everyone's doing the
Yes, that's
same
another
thing.
thing. You think you found a system and then suddenly it changes. That's the story
Yeah,
of YouTubing, right?
it's
Oh
like
yeah.
when I mentioned Meisner, like that was like my first time one of my videos got some good hits was that, and then everything after that was all Meisner related because of all the comments I was getting. And when I tried to veer away from that, my views and that went like right low, and it took me a long time to sort of get back up to the level I was, whilst not mentioning Meister.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another thing. It's like, unfortunately, you will get a little pigeonholed no matter what, right? And
Yeah,
yeah, that's another unfortunate thing. Again, um, the social media game is a little bit like martial arts training in a way. It's like inevitably you're gonna get pigeonholed, and if you don't
yeah.
recognize it and you don't break out of it, then yeah, it's. I never thought about it. That analogy is kind of a perfect analogy. Yeah, because it's easy in martial arts, just like in social media, to get into a bubble too, right? So it
Yeah,
is a kind of a
yeah,
similar kind of. Yeah, and that's why every few years I try to be like, okay, like what can I do slightly different? I don't want to do something so different that the algorithm hates me, but like what can I do slightly different just to make sure I'm not creating my own bubble or live in my own bubble, right? And that's why people are like,
yeah,
Jerry, why is it that sometimes I see you like really if a fan of traditional arts, but sometimes I see you not? I'm like, well, that's how I keep myself honest. That's how I keep my brain learning.
yeah,
If I'm only a basher of MMA or a basher of traditional martial arts, then I'm not being honest to myself as a martial artist or as a person in
yeah.
general who wants to keep learning.
But that's the important thing, isn't it? It should be truth. You shouldn't be chasing views to the point where you lose who you are
Yeah,
yourself. And I've seen quite a few people do that. They start to find that audience, and then they change their whole content to suit that audience. And I
yeah,
think, well, that's a bit soulless then.
yeah.
If all you're doing is just trying to chase those views, are you even inspired by your own content anymore? And I think that's what keeps me coming back to your channel actually on that subject is the fact that you are so passionate about what you do. I think if it ever got to where you're just going through the motions, I think that'd be when when people had stopped watching.
Yeah. And the reason a lot of people are like, "Oh, you have so many channels." The reason I have so many channels is if I feel like I'm going through the motions, I'll try to find another topic to get passionate
Yeah,
about, right? And that's what I would recommend. If anyone has this kind of question about, okay, if you feel yourself getting pigeonholed, what do you do? Well, like put that pigeonhole into a separate channel. I think that's a good way.
yeah,
So like your main dream, your main thing, like keep that honest, right? If you need to have a little side pigeonhole, side bubble, put that in a separate thing. So like the
yeah.
majority of your mind is still good. Just make a little space in one part of your brain for that little pigeonhole. I think that's a good little thing I've learned all these years.
That is good advice,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is the day in the life of you like right now?
So right now, oh, since COVID, so I work an insane amount of hours. Like I'm doing
Uh-huh.
12-hour shifts. Sometimes I'm working like 6 on, 2 off, or sometimes even I've even worked like, which is technically illegal, uh, 16 days in a
Wow.
row without like a day off. Like where I've had, I suppose they count it as a day off because I've finished at 6 in the morning and then I haven't been in till the following 6 o'clock in the evening. So they
Mm-hmm.
count that as 24 hours off, but it's not really a day off. You still worked both of those days, you know. And yeah, so that's why I stopped training at my other gym because I used to try and get down there 2, 3 times a week to the fight gym. That went out the window. Uh, then I felt like I wasn't getting much support from my old coach, so I kind of cancelled my membership. And yeah, so now I try film some content a couple of times a week. I've got a backlog of stuff that I need to edit. That's what I say. It's the editing that takes its time. I do my Nigung training, which is internal strength, and a lot of people try to misrepresent that as some magical thing. It's not. It's holding and moving in a lot of really difficult postures, a bit like yoga, I guess, in a lot of ways. It hurts. It's exercise, you know. I did some forms training, and now with this jiu-jitsu gym that's opening up close to me, I'm hoping to get at least one jiu-jitsu session in a week now. So,
Mm.
but yeah, that's
Okay.
basically it. I'm not as I'd love when things calm down at work a bit. I think I'd love to get into more training, and I want to produce content that shows what Tai Chi has to offer. But again, I started to do that a bit, and the views were so rubbish. I kind of give up after a couple of videos. I need to find a way of promoting that well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Potentially, if you're interested, SFX Championship that I've come in contact with, maybe if
Yeah,
you want, you could try to compete in there. I don't know if that's up your alley, but if you are looking in the future for something to do, SFX Championship, like I would call them, they're sort of think karate combat, but maybe what's the right word? They're like karate combat, but maybe slightly a little bit more point fighting, I guess. Maybe that's the way to describe it.
yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I don't know. That's something we could talk about in the future, but it'd be really cool to see you at least do one match in
I,
SFX Championship.
yeah, I do. I get the. But every time I see, like, every time I watch the UFC or I watch some friends compete, like, I get a buggy and I go, oh, come on, you've got another fighting, you've got another fighting, and I think that's what's affected my training as well. When I had a goal, like I was down, I was lifting weights like 4 or 5 times a week. When I was training up for my fights, I was lifting weights and doing cardio stuff 4 or 5 times a week. I was going to the fight gym like at least 4 times a week. I was sparring at least like twice a week. I was doing all these things. I was in better shape than I'd ever, it was in my late 30s, early 40s. I was in the best shape of my life. As soon as I stopped fighting, that need to train to that level kind of went out the window. And I think if I could have a focus where I go, yeah, I'm going to aim to do that, that would probably get me back
Yeah.
doing what I need to do.
I think you and I have the same mentality. Like we are very goal oriented, right? And
Yeah,
it's the same thing. Like I think about so last year, unfortunately, I was having a lot of weird head tension issues. So like I had to stop training for a bit. And then like this year, I just kept getting injured. And it's like part of it, I think what was going on with me is just that I also like couldn't find a goal with my martial arts training. And it
yeah,
might be like, I'm really into savate, right? Maybe it's like I need to just have a savate match. That'll get me
yeah,
back into training with like the right approach, so that I don't just like, I'm exercising and oh, I got hurt. Oh no, and I didn't even get hurt like doing martial arts. Like, what am I doing? Like you got
yeah,
to have that goal. I think like you and I have a very similar mentality, and it's just like if you can't find like a concrete goal with your training, sometimes it's just like we both have other things going on. So like we
yeah.
focus on other things.
That's what happens. Yeah, yeah. You get distracted by it. Well, this is this is going somewhere, so I'm going to focus
Yeah. Yeah.
on this. Yeah,
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? But at the end of the day, if we still want to grow in our martial arts journey, then it's like maybe we got to set a goal. Kind of like with my chess journey. My chess journey was like, oh, I had a competition I wanted to prepare for. And then I did one competition in chess. I'm like, I want to get better. I want to prepare for another competition, right? There's goals for that.
yeah,
With I'm taking tax classes. Oh, I want to get that class finished so I like, like pass that course, right? That's a goal right there. So it's like, what is
yeah,
that goal you can set for yourself in martial arts? Obviously, Alan, a lot of times people are like, my belt, my belt, my belt, but I don't think
yeah.
you and I care
No,
about belts.
I've
So
never cared about. Yeah,
yeah,
I would, because when I was at the fight gym, like a lot of the people that started the same time as me really went down that journey to get a belt,
yeah,
and a lot of them are like brown belts, black belts now, whereas I'm still on my purple belt, second stripe, because if I had a choice between doing an MMA class or a jiu-jitsu class, I was taking the MMA every time because it's more in line with what I wanted to do.
yeah,
And yeah, it's never bothered me because when you roll, that's the great equalizer. I know I can tap black belts, but I know that there's blue belts out there that can tap me. The belt. What was it? Was it Mr. Miyagi who said, "Hold your pants up"? That's basic. It holds your gi together. That's all the belt does.
yeah,
There's some black belts out there who are amazing, but there's some black belts out there who are pretty average, in my opinion. And it's yeah, I want to learn new skills. I don't care if I get a belt. That's basically what it comes down to.
yeah. And like the wanting to learn new skills sometimes is a little too vague for the mind, right? So like you got to
Yeah,
find something more actionable or something more measurable to kind of motivate the mind. It's so funny. Like it's so funny how much you and I think alike. Like, I never care about belts. It's the same thing. My thing is as long as I'm learning new skills, but like how do you measure that? And then usually it's like, oh, if I feel like my commentary gets better after training, or if I feel like I can recognize more
yeah,
cool martial arts patterns that I didn't see before. But I think that's probably not even enough anymore. Like, because I've found that love with other things, right? Oh, with chess, with
yeah,
law. So then it's like, okay, now I need an even better metric for martial arts to continue training. So yeah, it's like
yeah,
we're kind of in sort of similar boats when it comes to like our thoughts about how to grow in martial arts versus how to like discipline yourself to keep training.
yeah,
And I'm saying all this, I ranted basically saying I don't know the answer right now. I'm in a very funny part of
yeah.
my martial arts journey right now. I'm just being honest with people watching.
Yeah, I think it's the same for me. It's trying to cope, I guess, with going from being, seeing my youth going that way, heading towards my 50s now. It's like, where do you get when you're not wanting to compete anymore, when you're not wanting to mix it with everyone every week? Where do you go from there? What is your focus? And yeah, but I still think I've got another fight in me. We'll see.
Yeah. Either way, we'll keep each other posted on that. And if it's
Yeah.
gonna be SFX Championship, maybe I'll fly over to support, man.
Be awesome.
Yeah, it'd be so cool. I've never been to the UK. What part of the UK are you in, if you don't mind? You don't have to tell the city,
Yeah,
but maybe the
no, no, yeah,
region.
yeah. I'm in Norfolk, so quite close to
Oh,
Norwich, if you've heard of Norwich. But
okay.
it's about an hour out from London, basically northeast of London.
Cool. Yeah. A lot of us Americans, because a lot of Americans haven't even traveled outside their state because, we're such a big country,
Yeah,
right?
it's such a huge thing.
It's
Yeah,
hard for us to understand that, let's say, a country like the UK, the UK is not too big compared to, let's say, probably California is bigger than the UK, I think. So, like,
I know Texas is,
yeah,
that's for
yeah,
sure.
exactly.
But yeah, but what a lot of Americans only when they come over it because we're quite close to like Mildenhall Air Base, which is an
Hmm.
American air base, and
Hmm.
So in the jiu-jitsu and MMA, you get a lot of Americans like train there. And what a lot of them talk about is that what they can't really understand is over in the States, you'd have to drive like 7 or 8 hours to get the difference from where we drive, like maybe an hour. Like
Mhm.
you're in a totally different area of the country. The countryside looks different. People sound different.
Yeah.
It blows a lot of American minds to realize, even though we're really tiny, we still have all of these different regions and areas. And a lot of Americans think we are just London.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna share this chart right here. Let's compare. Let's see. So, it's about exactly. So like UK is kind of the size of California. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Oh, there's like a little northern portion here of the UK. I didn't know. I guess it's part of Scotland or something.
yeah, one
Interesting.
of the islands.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, I would argue too that that's why if you go to Europe, I think the average European's happier because things are a little closer. It just builds more community. I really think so. Like the reason why Americans have this like thing where like it's very hard for Americans to find community, especially in certain states and certain areas. I think it's just because the distances are too far, man.
And again, that's one of the great things about martial arts is it builds a community,
Yeah,
and it also can go too far and end up like cultist behavior as well. That's the only trouble. Got to find a balance.
yeah, it really is. And one of those like life things that people always ask is as you get older, how do you make friends, right? And I guess one way is through a hobby, is through your interests.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think there's any other way. I mean, there's certain apps where it's like it's for meeting people, but those apps are kind of cringe. Like you
yeah,
go to those meetups for just for the sake of meeting people, and rarely, I've had success. I've met a cool friend there, but like rarely to to have success like that.
yeah. Well, it's the same as dating apps, isn't it? When people are disposable, like what's the point in sticking around?
Yeah,
That's the problem with any app like that. I think, yeah, I always say to people when they go, "Oh, how do you make friends? How am I supposed to make a friend?" Like when, especially the age I am now, life's changed quite a lot. People divorce, people like change career, and it can feel very lonely. And I'm always like, just find a hobby, join a club. Like it's the best way. And
yeah,
whatever that club is, whether it's sewing, cooking, anything, but just as long as you're going to meet people that have the same sort of mindset as you.
yeah, yeah. And find a hobby that you really want to get better at,
Yeah,
right? Don't
exactly. Yeah,
get a hobby to meet people. Like
yeah.
find a hobby that you really want to do, and then you'll meet people naturally that way.
Yeah. And that shocks me in life, like how few people have actual passions.
Yeah,
Yeah, I find it so weird. You talk to people like, "Oh, so what music do you like?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't really listen to music." Like, "Oh, what are your favorite films?" "Oh, I don't really watch much. Kind of like Marvel films." Again, and you're like, "Oh my God, you're so like beige. Like, what,
yeah,
and how do you exist in life with it,
yeah,
with nothing that like brings out that fire?"
yeah, yeah. A lot of people wonder, especially my parents are always like, Jerry, why don't you just like live in DC? My parents live in DC, right? The nation's
Hmm.
capital around there. I'm like, because most people there have no hobbies. It's like
Really?
there's a reason, California's not perfect, but most people here have like side hustles, they have dreams.
Yeah,
And it's like I like being around that as much as you can complain about many things about California, but like um people around me, they all have things they want to do. And it's like other parts of the world, I guess sometimes around where you live, you feel the same. It's like there's parts of the country, parts of the world where it's like people don't have that thing. Like you ask them what can they like rant about for hours and like they don't have that. It's like what?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? The last topic I'll talk about on this subject is, and then these people who have no hobbies, usually they're also the ones who will like rant about the thing you're passionate about. They'll try to like get on your level and they'll cringe it out. Like I think a lot of the weird comments you get on YouTube are people like that. It's like they don't really have a hobby, but like somehow they'll be able to like mesh themselves into your hobby, but like they don't really know. Like
yeah.
I've met a lot of people like that. It's like they'll start like pretending they know a lot about YouTube. I'm like, but like you're asking me dumb questions. Like stop talking. Like just like
Yeah. Well, especially martial arts, that the ones that'll take. Yeah, I remember I was having this fight in a pub, and it's like it's not the same thing, mate. It's your scuffle with somebody where you pushed and pulled each other a little bit isn't anything to do with martial arts. Please stop talking.
yeah, yeah.
But you just
So
have to sit and listen to it and nod.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So the lesson to all this is like you got to have a lot of things going on. You know, of course, there's a balance too. Don't like overcommit yourself to a lot of stuff, but you got to have, I would say, at least 3 or 4 things that you're passionate about. Because that way,
Yeah,
if you realize you have a gap in your knowledge in one thing, you can choose 3 things, right? You can, of course, ignore it, which I don't think is the right thing. You could get better at that, fill the gap, or if it's too painful for you right now, focus on some of the other things you're passionate about,
yeah,
right? That way you don't get so ego upset over one thing. Like, oh my God, my worldview is challenged. Oh my God, like that's why, like a lot of martial artists, I think martial arts is the only thing, right? That's why you get
yeah.
so much of that cultish cringe thing. It's like, take it less seriously.
I think again, bringing it back to like the traditional martial arts and the foolishness that exists there. That's why a lot of them can't leave it behind. How
Yeah,
can you admit that this is nonsense if you're going to lose all of your friends?
yeah,
Like that's your identity now. How are you
yeah,
supposed to let go of that if you are that person? That all of a sudden you haven't got that and you have no life anymore because you've got nothing else but this.
yeah,
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah,
yeah.
get more than one hobby.
Get more than one hobby. And part of what helped me through last year when I was having all this head tension and all this weird stuff was I found more hobbies. I was
Yeah,
like, it helped me a lot because now I'm still passionate about martial arts, but I got other things I can be passionate about. And that was great.
yeah,
When I started on YouTube, I don't know if people know this, but I had other channels that were big. I just dropped them to focus on fight commentary breakdowns, which was good, but I lost a part of me. I'm just being honest. And I
yeah,
still lost a part of me. So it's like, that's my journey. I'm still trying to find my passions, right? And it
yeah,
never ends. I think any person, even when they're 99, they can pick up a new hobby.
yeah. I think, and you see it all the time. Yeah, you do see like people who decided to do a degree at like 88 years old, and people are stupid. And you're like, no, what's stupid is not wanting to learn new things at that age. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope I'm that way. I hope I carry on trying to learn and do stuff right up
Yeah.
until the very end.
I've heard of people who got their MD. They went to medical school in their 40s or 50s, man. It
Yeah,
happens. Probably not good for your health, but then again,
yeah.
yeah. Wow.
Neither's getting punched in the head. Let's face
Exactly.
it. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think this was a great first conversation. Let's definitely have you back whenever you want to do a conversation. Please,
Oh
let's
yeah,
do
that'd be
more.
great. I'd love that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I will find the Tai Chi footage, that push hand seminar. I'm gonna recommendate it, and I'll like share you a Google Doc if you wanna
Yeah, I'd
commentate
love to
any
do
of
that.
that.
Yeah.
Because there was another Tai Chi guy. I need to send you that video too. He's the son of the guy who played the Emperor in the Jet Li movie. So like,
Right.
he's a guy who's been in the martial arts scene forever because he grew up with martial arts. And he did like a 2 video response to that Tai Chi video. I got a lot out of it. And my whole dream was like I was gonna feature him, I was gonna redo
Yeah.
the commentary. I just haven't got on it. So maybe I finally need to jump on that.
Yeah, you have to do that.
Yeah, exactly. He had the funniest line. He's like, this isn't push hands, this is bullying. I was like, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Guys, this was Alan. I'm in defense of traditional martial arts. And as this video encodes after it finishes going live on YouTube, I'll put more links. I'll put more stuff in the description of stuff we talked about. So, and Alan, I might do a little featurette too on your meetup with the guy, the Wing Chun guy. I
Oh
think
yeah, no, I'd love
it's
that.
worth
Yeah,
it.
free to any of that footage. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we have a lot more to come. Everyone watching, thank you guys so much. I know there were some people in the live chat, some people watching live. So anyone that watches live, that's awesome. So leave your comments for Alan too, and we will talk a lot more. So Alan, thank you so much for tuning in.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. This has been awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. So anytime you want to come, I'm serious. Like I always tell people, like anytime. I love doing these conversations. It's also a a way to step away from the main channel in a way that but still involve yourself with martial arts, right? Because if you just think about one thing, it's not good for the mind. But we've talked about that 20 times already through
Yeah.
this conversation.